Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments that define us, not by the titles we carry, but by the grit we summon when we're underestimated, overlooked, or outright mocked. Let me tell you a story, not about fame, not about fortune, but about a young woman, the daughter of a janitor, who walked into a room full of engineers, was laughed out of it, and yet left that same room with every head bowed in disbelief. Her name isn't in textbooks. She didn't graduate from an Ivy League school. She wasn't wearing a lab coat, but she carried something far more powerful than any diploma or badge. She carried determination born in silence. She carried a mind trained by necessity. She carried the legacy of a mother who scrubbed those very floors engineers walked on without ever looking up. She walked into the room unnoticed. Her jeans bore the marks of labor-faded knees, oil stains, and frayed seams that told stories no resume ever could. The others stood tall in their suits, polished badges gleaming, voices loud with certainty, armed with degrees and decades of theory. She, on the other hand, carried none of that, only silence, observation, and a quiet understanding, forged not in lecture halls, but in long hours beside her mother in garages and maintenance rooms where broken things found life again. So when she spoke, timid, almost hesitant, they barely listened. When she suggested what might be wrong with the engine that had baffled experts for over a decade, smirks lined their faces. Laughter wasn't cruel. It was condescending, as if to say, "What could you possibly know?" But she didn't flinch, because she wasn't there to impress them. She was there to fix something broken. And as they dismissed her, she walked slowly toward the engine, fingers running gently across the cold, rusted surface. She didn't need a manual. She had memory, pattern recognition, intuition shaped by necessity, not curriculum. She found the fracture, a tiny oversight buried beneath layers of assumptions and pride, and she named it. Just like that. What they missed, what they were too proud to admit, is that brilliance doesn't always announce itself with applause or credentials. It often speaks in the quiet moments, between the noise of arrogance and the silence of humility. She didn't wear authority. She wore understanding. They judged her by her clothes, her background, her volume, but she judged the machine by its mechanics, its truth, and that was the difference. Genius isn't always dressed for the part. Sometimes it walks in covered in grease, carrying the answers the experts missed. She didn't learn from professors. She learned from problems, real ones, the kind that don't come with answer keys or deadlines neatly printed on a syllabus. While others were reading manuals in air-conditioned classrooms, she was watching her mother stretch a single paycheck across a month. She was listening to the groan of a heater on its last breath, and feeling the cold creep into their apartment like an unwelcome guest. That's where her education began, not in lectures but in necessity. In the garage behind their apartment, surrounded by rusted tools and half-dead machines, she dismantled whatever she could find, broken bicycles, generators, lawnmowers, even old engines no one believed would run again. It wasn't a hobby. It wasn't curiosity. It was survival when the water pump stopped, when the lights flickered, when the stove wouldn't ignite. She figured it out because she had to. There was no expert coming to the rescue, no hotline, no textbook, just grit, determination, and her own two hands. She once said, "When your mom works double shifts and your heater breaks in December, you either learn how to fix the engine, or you freeze." And that was her reality, not a quote for inspiration, a choice between comfort and cold, between watching or doing, and every time she chose to try. Piece by piece, day after day, failure after failure, she taught herself what institutions never showed her. The language of broken things, the rhythm of moving parts, the art of paying attention to what others overlook, without formal training, without recognition, without applause, because deep knowledge doesn't always come from institutions. Sometimes it's carved out in silence, forged through hardship, and earned not in degrees, but in lived experience. The engine was massive, cold, rusted, abandoned. 10 years of silence had turned it into little more than a forgotten relic, a monument to failure. Expert after expert had tried to bring it back, but nothing worked. Manuals were followed, protocols were repeated, diagnoses made, and always the same result, silence. But this young woman, she didn't flinch. She didn't ask for credentials or applause. She asked for a wrench, because she had faced storms far fiercer than broken machinery. She had faced poverty that stretched weeks into months. She had faced rejection that echoed in job interviews, in scholarship denials, in rooms where no one believed in her. She had faced hunger that carved itself into memory, so a little rust didn't scare her. She approached the engine differently. She didn't see a machine. She saw a story of years misunderstood. She placed her hands on the metal like she was greeting an old friend. She listened, not to noise, but to silence. She knew that silence often speaks if you know how to hear it. She knew where to look, where time had choked the valves, where dust had silenced potential, and where neglect had disguised brilliance. One by one, she moved with quiet precision, a twist here, a wire rerouted there, nothing flashy, just careful hands shaped by years of solving problems no textbook prepared her for. She didn't guess. She knew, because adversity had trained her with exactness. Every mistake in her past had sharpened her judgment. Every failure had refined her intuition. Then it happened. The engine, long dead, rumbled, then roared. It wasn't just a machine coming to life. It was the sound of someone rewriting a narrative, not just of what the engine was, but of who she was, of what adversity can make possible when it builds precision. Mockery is the sound of people who fear what they don't understand. When they laughed, it wasn't because she was wrong. It wasn't because her idea didn't hold weight or because she lacked intelligence. No, they laughed because she disrupted their version of reality. She didn't fit into their frame of reference. She didn't wear the right title, the right badge, or the right clothes. She didn't come from their schools or circles. And that unfamiliarity, it threatened them. So they did what insecure minds do when confronted with something they don't recognize. They mocked her. But their laughter was never a reflection of her failure. It was a projection of their fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear of losing control. Fear that someone outside their carefully built walls could see something they missed. Their ego couldn't stand the possibility. It's easier to dismiss what you don't understand than to admit you might have overlooked a quiet kind of brilliance. She didn't need to shout back. She didn't need to defend herself with noise. She didn't throw their insults back at them or crumble under their sneers. She simply turned a wrench, a small, deliberate movement. A single action born not of pride but of purpose, and then it happened. Silence. The kind of silence that only comes when arrogance is caught off guard, when results speak in a language no laughter can drown out. That moment wasn't just about fixing an engine. It was about reclaiming space that people thought she didn't belong in. It was about truth rising in the form of action. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all, and let your work echo louder than their mockery ever could. Legacy is not where you come from, but what you leave behind. She walked out of that room the same way she walked in, quiet, steady, unnoticed. No applause, no fanfare, just the sound of silence and the soft hum of a machine that hadn't breathed life in over a decade. But behind her, something had changed, not just the engine, which now pulsed like a heart rediscovered, but the people, the engineers, the onlookers, the skeptics. They didn't just see a fixed machine, they saw her. For the first time, they truly saw the brilliance that doesn't announce itself. They saw the intelligence that doesn't come wrapped in a fancy title or a pristine degree. They saw the strength of someone who grew up repairing what others threw away. Someone who learned not in classrooms, but in the crucible of hardship. Someone who didn't just study diagrams, but rebuilt broken things when it mattered most. They saw a woman shaped by storms and powered by purpose, and she didn't just fix an engine. She cracked open the ceiling. She made space for the next girl who gets underestimated, the next boy who's told he doesn't belong, the next soul who works in silence, hoping someone will finally see what they carry. So to every young person who's been mocked, dismissed, or overlooked, your origin does not define your destiny. Your power lies in what you create, what you restore, what you leave better than you found it. Fix the thing they said couldn't be fixed. Show up even when they doubt you, and when you walk out of that room, whatever that room is, walk tall, because the very people who laughed, one day they'll whisper your name. Not out of pity, but out of respect, out of awe, out of legacy.